Okay, good evening, everybody. Hope you can hear me. First off, I just want to thank everyone for coming. This is a good turnout. We're thrilled, actually, to have this many people show up. It's cold and it's winter time, so we really do appreciate you taking the time to be here. We're about at the midway point of these programs that we have planned over the course of this year. Our next one is in about a month, and it is about lesbian, gay, transgender youth, which is something that we deal with here in the district. So we invite you to be here for that presentation also. I'm going to hand the mic over just in 1 second to our student assistance counselor at the high school, Lisa Lattarulo. But I just wanted to mention this is a topic I don't know that much about. About a month ago, after a football game, I was watching 60 Minutes. Maybe some of you saw the segment, but it was about a 20, 30-minute long segment about mindfulness. And I had only heard the term because these ladies planned these sessions. And I watched it and thought to myself, if I could even grasp a tiny bit of this and implement it in my life, I'd be healthier and happier and less stressed. That was a month ago. I haven't taken a single step toward betterment. So tonight, I'm really excited actually to just sit back and listen and hopefully learn as much as I can. And John seems like a terrific person to start me down that path potentially anyway. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Lisa Lattarulo so she can introduce John more formally, and then we'll enjoy the program.
Good evening, everybody. So this program tonight is presented by John Grund, and John is actually a local therapist here in Chatham and also in Chester, but he also does what I do at Bernardsville High School. So he is working with teenagers every day and has been for more than 20 years, 25 years, I don't know, 27 years. So he's got a lot of experience, and not only does he see them in the high school setting, but he obviously sees them in a private practice. But one of the reasons why, we Alex Emmer and I decided to bring this program to Chatham is, you are starting to hear a lot more about the practice of mindfulness or people meditating. You're sort of hearing some of the stuff that's being tied into well-being. But certainly in our positions as counselors, we see a lot of kids that are very stressed out, very disconnected, don't really know how to make connections, don't really know how to kind of calm themselves down, or really how to take care of themselves when things get really stressful. And this tool of mindfulness can be super helpful for these kids, for everybody. And so John's really an expert in this area and does a lot of training. I'm actually taking one of his classes right now in mindfulness. And he's just got a lot of expertise in it, and a lot of training, a lot of practice with it. And he's just a wealth of knowledge. So I hope you'll enjoy his program and certainly learn something tonight.
Is this better? Hello? So my mother says that the Irish in me is the best part, and being Irish, we love to tell stories. So I have to start with a story that has probably some really deep meaning. You'll have to come up with it. We'll see what happens. It's called If You're Unhappy, and the author is unknown. Once upon a time, there was a non-conforming sparrow who decided not to fly south during the winter. We have some teens who sometimes are non-conforming, I think. So the sparrow decides to not fly south, and the winter comes along. The ice begins to get on his wings. He falls down into the ground, develops hypothermia, and he's just about to die. And this cow comes along, and the cow craps on him. The cow craps on him. The manure warms him. He gets really happy, and he starts to sing. Just when he starts to sing, a cat hears the sounds, investigates, goes to the manure, cleans the manure out, and then promptly eats the bird. The morals of the story: 1, everybody who craps on you is not your enemy. 2, everyone who gets you out of crap is not necessarily your friend. And last and most important, if you're warm and happy in a pile of crap, keep your mouth shut. So there, I can get really deep about where that goes into mindfulness, but I think it's a really good place to start about this idea of happiness and about stillness. And I could ramble on for hours about how important this is and how it's come into my life. But I want to just give you a basic overview, give you some exercises tonight to deal with. We're not going to be doing kumbaya. We're not going to be sitting cross-legged, going om and all that. But I will show you what this can do for us and give you a little bit of explanation about how it can impact you, and then start talking about your teens and how important I think this is for kids and where we're going. How many of you even know about mindfulness? A few. All right. Any of you have a practice? Excellent, excellent. So if there's things that I'm talking about you want to add, please feel free to do that. So the first thing I'm going to ask you to do is to sit still. And could you put your feet on the ground? And the other thing I'm going to ask is if you can turn off your phones. Unless you have an absolute emergency that you have to deal with, I'd really like you to try to stay away from the technology for the next 55 minutes and see if you can do it. Good luck. So one of the things that we talked about in doing this practice is to sit with a sense of dignity, and whatever that means for you, and to sit upright. And what I want you to do is just, if you feel comfortable, close your eyes. If you don't feel comfortable closing your eyes, just stare in front of you that you're not distracted. And I just want you to sit there for a few moments and see what happens. You can open your eyes. Just if I can hear for a couple people, what happens when you just sit? Anybody? You start to listen more. What else? You start to think. Yeah, we're going to talk about thoughts and thinking in a second. Anybody else? Anybody get tired? Yeah, it's amazing. The moment we stop, we start to really see how exhausted and how sleep deprived we are. Anything else happen with people when you do it? Go ahead. Your body relaxed. I'm sorry, somebody else said something? Centered, breathing. And what was about breathing? Breathe easier. Okay? So just take a quick guess. I'm going to do one other experiment with you. For the next 15 seconds, I want you to count how many thoughts you have. Ready? Go. How'd you do? 7. Don't worry, there's no right answer. We're not in school right now. 4. Anybody have none? Really? Awesome. Very hard to do, if possible. The average person has 50,000 thoughts a day. And it's pretty easy to measure. If you put that out to a minute, you multiply it, somebody asks, how do they measure it? You can count it. 50,000 thoughts a day. All right? Now take those thoughts for a second, and there's also realized 95% of them are exactly the same thoughts you had yesterday. We're really not that creative. Sorry. 95%. Pretty amazing. So here's what I want you to get into. How do you know you have a thought? Interesting. This is stuff we don't teach. We have a thought because we hear it in our head. We have a little voice in our head. Doesn't mean you're psychotic. If you have multiple voices, we got to talk. But you have a little voice in your head, and we hear it. Now imagine that voice for a second is your roommate, and it doesn't shut up all day. What would you do? I'd choke it. Really, it just doesn't shut up. Now imagine for a second if that voice was hooked to a loudspeaker, and wherever you walked around, people could hear everything that you think. How embarrassing that is. It'd be amazing. It's an embarrassing. We can't stop our thoughts. And one of the things I want you to get into, people hear this word mindfulness or meditation. I'll give you a quick definition. Meditation is a Sanskrit word that means to cultivate. And what meditation cultivates, it cultivates attention, or it cultivates mindfulness. I'll get a little bit more into the definition of mindfulness, but basically it's paying attention. So it's nothing like you're going to go to some other space or thing. And we have this weird views. You know, when I bring up with kids, particularly when I'm working with kids, I mention the word meditation. They think of Rafiki sitting there cross-legged, you know, going om and all that. My training, 99% of my training is completely medical. My original training was up at UMass General Hospital with a gentleman named John Kabat-Zinn, and I'll talk a lot about him because he's done wonders about bringing this to the secular world. But this idea that we're cultivating awareness, and if you start looking at it, it's like weightlifting. The more we can take our attention and train our attention to slow down these thoughts, you won't get rid of them, but to start to realize they are just thoughts. They're mental events, and they're not true all the time. Give you a quick test on it. Let's say I know all of you, and we know each other enough that if you yelled to me across the street and go, John, John, right, and you wave to me, that I would know who you are, right? So imagine I'm walking down Main Street in Chatham, you're on the other side, you yell, John, John, and I don't respond to you. What's your first thought about it? Go ahead, don't filter it. What's your first thought? What a jerk! Right? Go ahead. What else? He didn't recognize me. Go ahead. I'm always amazed at responses. What's that? What's wrong? What's wrong with him? Right? What else? Is he mad at me? Isn't that amazing? That's immediately where we go. And it could be good too. Like the realization would be that you didn't realize that I had headphones in and I was kind of rocking out to whatever music and I just really never saw you. But instantly we get that story. And instantly that story comes up, and then this is what happens to us. And that's stress, and we'll talk a lot about stress and all that, but it happens so instantly. But when we can catch ourselves, we start to realize I'm making up the story because I don't know what the truth is. And if you leave here with anything, this mantra I teach all my patients, this idea of it may feel real, but it's not true. And how many times that happens to us. And again, I'm going to talk about you first, and then we're going to get to our kids because we have such a hard time doing this. Imagine our kids. Because part of my other job is I'm an anti-bullying specialist. The misinterpretations with kids and what's going on, it's amazing to me, in particular technology, and we can deal with that. So I want to show you a quick video about stress, because I think this is very important.
The best of us. But how bad is it for you?
Hold on, I'm sorry, I'll start it over.
Stress actually. In a busy world with unending work and responsibilities piling up, stress can get to the best of us. But how bad is it for you, really? Can stress actually kill you? From a biological perspective, stress makes perfect sense. If you're about to get chomped on by a bear, your stress hormones better kick your butt into gear. But it turns out that your mortgage, unemployment, and looming exam all trigger the same stress response in your body. And unlike most animals, which eventually experience a major decrease in these hormones, humans can't seem to find the off switch. Even though it's not life and death, our psychological woes consistently bathe our bodies in these hormones, making our heart pound, muscles tense, and stomach turn. In Japan, they have the term karoshi, which literally translates to death from overwork. In what is now deemed an overworking epidemic, these individuals who are seemingly healthy and in their prime suddenly die. After being officially recognized and documented in Japan, these sudden heart attacks and strokes were quickly linked to stress. But how does stress cause this? Cortisol is one of the main stress hormones, which helps divert energy to where you need it and away from non-essential functions of the body. But with chronic stress exposure, problems arise. The immune system shuts down, inflammation is inhibited, white blood cells are reduced, and susceptibility to disease increases. Some evidence also suggests that prolonged stress may be involved in the development of cancer. When looking at the arteries of macaque monkeys, those under significant stress have more clogged arteries. This prevents blood from getting to the heart quickly during stress and can ultimately lead to heart attack. The brain also takes a toll. When looking at mice exposed to stress, we see dramatically smaller brain cells with fewer branch extensions than normal mice. This is particularly prevalent in the areas associated with memory and learning, which may stir up some memories for you of those wonderful all-night study sessions. The acute stress and sleep deprivation can make it increasingly difficult to remember the things we want to. Perhaps the most telling story is in our DNA. We contain something called telomeres at the end of our chromosomes, which decrease in size with our age. Our video on aging here explains this process. Eventually, the telomeres run out, at which point the cell stops duplicating and dies. So telomeres are directly related to aging and length of life. And it turns out, stress may actually accelerate the shortening of these telomeres. But not all hope is lost for the perpetually stressed. Another hormone, oxytocin, has been shown to reduce this stress response. It helps your blood vessels relax and even regenerates the heart from stress-related damage. So how do we get more oxytocin? It's sometimes dubbed the cuddle hormone because it's released during positive social interactions and while caring for others. People who spend more time with others create a buffer or resilience to stress. So when life gets the best of you, just remember, you don't have to go it alone. Spend some time with those you love. It may just save your life. Got a burning question you want answered? Ask it in the comments or on Facebook.
So in my 27 years that I've been working with teenagers, and I've been really fortunate to work with everything. I used to work in Newark with gangs, in Elizabeth, the South Bronx with heroin addicts, and then now I'm in Bernardsville. Figured that one out. But stresses all around. And in the 27 years, I have had more kids hospitalized. I have more kids on anti-anxiety drugs than I've ever had in my entire life. And now also in my practice, dealing with a lot of corporate executives who can hold it together all day long, and then they're falling apart and popping Xanax all day and stuff. So it's amazing where we're at. And there's been lots of studies showing we're probably in one of the most stressful periods ever. And again, what causes our stress is because we don't have bears attacking us. It's our thought process. And those thoughts can trigger instantly the same responses. And I'll get a little bit into that. I want you to leave here with some good tools. So I'm going to give you a quick tool. So I'm going to ask you again to sit with dignity again and guide you through a brief little exercise. And I'll explain everything about it to you in the science of it. So again, sitting with dignity, if you can lift your shoulders up to your ears, just relax for a minute and drop it down. If you can relax between your eyes, relax your face. See if you can just let your body settle in the chair. And again, if you feel comfortable, I invite you to close your eyes. If you're not comfortable with that, just stare loosely in front of you. And I want you to start paying attention to your breath. Wherever you most feel it or most notice it. It might be in your nostrils or in your throat. It might be in your lungs or your belly. And when you get distracted, and which you will, by a thought or a feeling or a sensation, just kindly and gently bring your attention back to your breath. And you may have to do that hundreds of times. And to go a little bit further, next I'm going to invite you, instead of just paying attention to your breath, see if you can sense it. And whatever that means to you, but to actually sense it and really feel the breath coming in and out. And again, when you get thoughts or feelings, just kindly and gently bring it back to the breath. Next, I'm going to invite you to imagine in your mind's eye a place that's really safe for you. A place that you feel accepted, a place that you feel rested, and a place that you feel relaxed. You can be by yourself, you can be with a loved one, you can be with a pet. But as you put yourself there in your mind's eye, I want you to also see if you can hit your senses. Imagine what that place smells like. If you're on the beach, you might smell the salt water. Imagine what that place sounds like. And then begin to look at and feel the feelings that you have when you're there rested. And again, next I'm going to invite you to go a little bit further with this if you feel comfortable, to put your left hand on your heart and your right hand on your belly. And just hold those there while you're in this safe place. And again, once you leave the place, kindly and gently just come back to that place the best you can. I'm going to ring a bell in a few moments. Just open your eyes when you no longer hear the bell. So how was that for people? Anybody fall asleep on me? Anything happen for people during that? It was calming. Okay? Anything else? Anybody feel anything with the hands on you or anything? No? So let me tell you quickly what's going on with you when you're doing that. The breathing part, that is what's called concentration meditation. You're paying attention to your breath. And the more you bring your attention back, that's what's creating your ability to pay attention. That's building. It's like the muscle. So people always say, oh, I should have a clear mind when I meditate. No, probably when you're more stressed out and you keep on bringing it back, you get more strength from doing that over and over again. And what they're showing in the current neuroscience, it's creating neural pathways and it's doing amazing things to your brain. And I'll show you a little bit about that in a video. But it's actually changing your brain by every time you keep on coming back. So that attention, again, think about weightlifting. It's a workout. People say, oh, I'll just get relaxed and do that. No, if you don't do this stuff and you don't develop, and I call it practice, you can't just turn it on. It's like any type of weightlifting or training. So that's one piece. The hands on you, it's basically you're giving yourself a hug and you're releasing oxytocin. And there's tons of studies that are showing it. You have a nerve that goes from your brain up here down into your gut called the vagus nerve. And by just putting our hands on us, they're doing all this work around this and figuring out that it works to calm us. They're also finding doing this. I work a lot with people with trauma, and they're finding people who are coming back from Afghanistan. They're doing a lot of this with the military. Just putting your hands like this, giving yourself a hug, is also releasing that oxytocin. Now, in your mind, anybody want to share what place they've gone to? Yes? No? Come on, somebody's got someplace good. Bermuda. Awesome. Awesome. Here's what's going on in your mind when you do that. And the best way to tell us is a story about my son. When he was about 8 or 9 years old, Colin, I came home one night and my wife said that he watched something on the Discovery Channel about hurricanes. And it really freaked him out. It was about Katrina. And it really freaked him out. And he's not a nervous kid, but he couldn't go to sleep. Now, my kids are doomed. Both my wife and I are therapists. So God only knows what happens. So I come to the house, and being my cognitive therapist, I brought my laptop up to my son. I said, Carl, it's February. There's not a cloud in the sky. There's no way a hurricane's going to come. And it was great. Typical 8-year-old. I know that, Dad. But I keep on having these images. And again, if there was an emergency happening, those images help us go into action. But they weren't. They're keeping him up. And they weren't real. So I taught him this activity that I just taught you. It's called PERT. It's called Positive Emotional Refocusing Technique. Lots of acronyms in my field. And I taught him this, and within 10 minutes, he was asleep. He put himself in Disney World. And put him there with his grandparents, and it calmed him down and put him to sleep. I was teaching this with a group of therapists one time, and this therapist confronted me and goes, that's not real. Why would you do that to a kid? That's not real. I said, neither is the hurricane. Which one's better for you? I teach this to kids all the time before exams. I teach them that you can get yourself in that safe place because our brains work so much better when we're calm compared to, and I'll go into the brain in a little bit, but compared to in that stress state. So it works. And it works really well. Questions? And just feel free at any point if you do have questions. But I'm going to try to get through the PowerPoint as best I can. Just a little thing about stress. Anybody know who Viktor Frankl is? Viktor Frankl survived Auschwitz. He wrote a phenomenal book called Man's Search for Meaning. If you take his quote here, it's this idea of that space, and that's what we're trying to create. When I mentioned before about that voice we hear in our head, who hears that? Anybody know? It gets a little cosmic-y at first, but it's really not. Who hears that voice? It's us. It's our consciousness. And it's our mind. We'll get into what the mind is. It's that space that we can create. That part of us is always calm. If you can tap into that and become more of the observer and watching what's going on, and instead respond rather than react, that's what we're going for. And this ability to create this attention and this idea of mindfulness is making this space get larger and larger. If you've ever read any of Viktor Frankl stuff, or you can go on YouTube, there's a video of him when he's 90 years old teaching at Stanford. The most optimistic man you will ever meet in your life. One of my friends had him as a professor, and he was the real deal. At 90 years old, he was taking flying lessons. So he was practicing this throughout his life. We're going to talk about dogs in a little bit, about what they have over us, because they can keep that nice clear head. John Kabat-Zinn he started what's called the UMass General Hospital. It's called the Mindfulness-Based Stress Reduction Clinic. He was working with chronically ill people and people with chronic pain, and he basically went to them and said, I have a way of having them approach pain that will help them in tremendous ways, but it has nothing to do with medicine and giving them medicine. It's meditation. And they thought he was crazy at first. John Kabat-Zinn, I forget, he was teaching anatomy at MIT. He's a brilliant, brilliant man. He comes completely from a scientific background. And here he was bringing these ancient Buddhist practices into a hospital. And he's done a phenomenal job. The Mindfulness-Based Stress Reduction Clinic is about 30 years old now. He's world-renowned. The special on 60 Minutes referred to it because he was in Cooper, went to one of his classes. This is John's definition of mindfulness. You can all read that. I don't have to read it to you. And the other person I'm going to talk about, particularly around your kids, around teens, is a gentleman named Dan Siegel. He's a psychiatrist out in California who's also a brain researcher. And here's his definition of mindfulness. It's this idea of coming off of automatic pilot. And I want you to think about it for a second. John talks about the idea of when you take a shower, how many people are in the shower with you? You start having your meetings there. You start bringing people in. And that's an automatic pilot. Now, how many times do we just respond all day long and we really don't have that attention? And that attention is critical for us to develop this practice. Okay? So I keep on bouncing. Is it okay if I just stand here for a couple minutes? Go back and forth. Dan created another thing, just because I'm going to be talking about him, because he's done a lot of research and a lot of work about the teen brain. He's created this thing called MindSight. How many of you have ever heard of emotional intelligence? Okay, it's just another definition of emotional intelligence, and it combines really well, and I'll explain that. When you get into emotional intelligence, there's 4 domains. Self-awareness is the first piece. So it's, do I know how I feel? And that's really a critical thing, because most of us don't know that. As a therapist, that typical question, how does that make you feel? Watch it sometimes. Even I've been a therapist for 30 years. It's a really hard question to answer sometimes. So the first part of it is, do we really know how we're feeling, what's going on with us? The next is self-management. What do you do with it? What do you do with that feeling? Do you explode and break something? Do you run away or do you stuff it down? Do you do something that's healthy and is effective with that emotion? Then we get into social awareness. Do we understand what's going on with other people? Do we understand what's going on with their emotions? I have a principal I work with or have worked with in the past. The kids figured out right away he can't handle if you cry. So the kids go in, they cry. He sends them all down to me. The kids figure out Mr. Grunn's nicer. He's not a disciplinarian. So it's that social awareness. And then the last piece about social management. What do you do with it? And I'm giving you a really extreme example, but a kid who has Asperger's is really struggling with this piece all the time and trying to figure that out. Here's a quick test for you about emotional intelligence. How many think it's females? Males? No trick question. Wait, some of you didn't raise your hand. All right. It is males. What occupation do you think this is? I'm sorry, what's that? Politics? We only wish. Only wish. Teachers? Okay. Anybody else? Psychologists? Engineers? Ready? Here it is. Shocking. Most effective naval commanders. One of the things that they're finding out more and more is top leaders, it's not about the ruthlessness. It's not about, the diehard, whatever you want to call it. It's about, can you collaborate? And can you really be aware of people? And they're doing lots and lots of studies. We're going to talk about Google. This is infused all throughout Google. And they're doing amazing work with it at this point. This quote comes from a book called Search Inside Yourself, which is Google's program on mindfulness and emotional intelligence. And they're training their leaders about collaboration. And I want you to think about this for a second, just go on a little bit of a tangent. What do we do with our most aggressive males in our society? Think of the alpha male. What do we do with them? We hope not. They go to jail. If you really go, they're most aggressive. So this idea of collaboration, and this tears Darwin's work really apart. People always thought Darwin's work said survival of the fittest. Darwin didn't say that. It's in his writings. This guy Spencer said it. Darwin wrote more about collaboration, empathy, and compassion. And I forget how many times the word compassion. He saw our survival was going to come when we learned how to collaborate more and more. And that original video that you saw about the stress and those monkeys, those telomere monkeys, one of the studies that they were doing with that, where they found out about the telomeres and stress, those monkeys got into tainted food, and it killed a whole bunch of them. And this experimenter who was doing it thought that his project was over, and he'd been doing 20 years. What they found out, though, it killed all the most aggressive males because their immune system and their telomeres were much less. Then that group of monkeys, I don't know what you call a group of monkeys, but whatever happened to them then, they then became very, very healthy. And there was no alpha males that rose up. They became more collaborative. They became much more of a community. And they said their health dramatically increased. So one of the things, I feel like I sell this stuff and it's free, but they're finding out more and more that if we practice this and we practice mindfulness, we become more compassionate, we become more kind to people, and our health gets much better, and our brains work better. So, what's the mind? Anybody know? Has anybody ever had a lecture on the mind? Not until I met Dan Siegel did I have anybody ever define it, and I've been to God knows how many classes in my life. Where is your mind? We don't know. People point here right away. That's your brain, and the brain is very different than the mind, and I'll start defining that in a second. It's a very different thing. Dan gets into this technical definition. I'm going to read the technical one just that you get it. The mind is an embodied and relational process that regulates the flow of energy and information. Does that make sense, everybody? No, it doesn't. It's that academic piece. I'm going to show it to you in real life. So I want you to sit still. And I want you to be kind of receptive. You can close your eyes again or not. I'm going to raise my voice a little bit, and I'm going to repeat a word, so I don't want to startle you. And I'm actually going to not do this into the mic because it'll be too loud. And I just want you to be really aware of your body. Okay, and I'm going to repeat the word about 4 or 5 times. No. 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 Where'd you feel that? Chest. Anybody else? Stomach. Shoulders. Anybody else? There's no right or wrong answer. Your head. Okay? Anybody else? Loosening or tightening? Tighten. Okay? Let go of that for a second. Let me give another word. Same thing. I'm not going to be as loud with it because I can't do this as loud. And again, just pay attention to your body. Yes. 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 Where'd you feel that? Chest, mouth, smile. Yeah, a couple of you start smiling as soon as I said that. Anybody else? Loosening or tightening? Loosening. This is coming from a new field called interpersonal neurobiology. Really nice big word. And that's a definition of the mind. It's, I am giving you information, the word, right? It's a flow of information going to you, and you're receiving it, right? My tone is giving that energy. All right? And then you're perceiving that energy, and then it's embodied. It's relational because it's happening between us. If you've ever been in a room after 2 people have fought, even though you might not have seen the fight, you can feel it. Now, there's things called peptides and stuff like that going on, but we also pick it up. We are very tuned into each other. And so just that really quick example, like you felt it right away. Now, to push you a little bit, and you don't have to reveal this, what kind of parent are you? Are you a no parent and your kids get tight around you? Or are you a yes parent where they're loose? And I do a lot of teacher trainings. I challenge teachers. Which environment do you create in your classroom? Because in no classroom, the moment you get into that, you're getting into a thing called fight or flight. That tightening, you're going right away, you're tightening up. And your brain shuts off. You don't need memory. Your memory is gone. How many times have you taken a test? You panic during a test. You forget everything. After the test, you're fine. That's your fight or flight, and that's what's getting turned on. Compared to that yes state, which opens you up and makes you be more receptive in your brain works. That's what also mindfulness can start to do, to create that openness. Because mindfulness gets into this ability to be more open. Is that making sense to people? It's powerful stuff. So we got the mind there, and we get into these three areas. Can you hear me? I'm going to have to put this down for a second because I need my hands. So I'm going to teach you a little bit about the brain. Do we have scientists here? Because no, they're not nervous. Oh, you do. All right. Forgive me. I'm going to be simple. For those of you, I'm going to sound really smart for a couple seconds. So imagine, we're going to use your hand as a brain. You can use my hand. You can just watch for a second. And we're going to show you the parts of the brain and what's happening with us when you're going through this stuff. So imagine right here in the bottom section of the brain, this is going to be the top front, bottom section, that's down near your neck, okay? That's called the reptilian brain. And the reptilian brain is what we share with reptiles. It's pretty much pooping and digestion and things that we don't have control over. Reptiles, snakes and stuff like that, they don't have emotions. They just bite you, they just react completely, right? Does that make sense to everybody? So in the reptilian brain, the only people that they found, Time Magazine did a special on it, they found Buddhist monks who could sit out in the cold with just like a cloak on or something, and they could melt the snow on them. They were able to tap into here by regulating their body temperature. And they're doing all this studying about it because we can't figure it out why they're doing it, but they can do it. They also have, you've ever heard of the 10,000 hour rule? Buddhist monks they were working with had meditated for more than 10,000 hours. So that's, none of us are going to get there unless they can start now. I'm going to open up the brain for a second. And in here, this is part of what's called the mammalian brain. This is what we share with dogs and horses and any mammal. And that's the mid part of our brain. The part here is called the limbic system. You've heard of the fight or flight response, right? So if I throw a snake at Mike, what are you going to do? Run. You're going to run away. That's the flight response. If you go and step on it, that's the fight response. There's two other F's that go with it that people don't talk about. One is fainting. It is a survival tactic for us. If a bear is coming after you, depending on black or grizzly, fainting is really good for you. Fainting also, and I just recently found this out, when we see blood, you know why it's really good to faint when you see blood? Levels you out on the ground, you don't bleed out. It's a phenomenal survival tactic. And the other one is freezing. You'll see rabbits do that a lot. They just freeze and you stand still. And you see people in terror, they'll freeze and all that. This is happening in this section, the mammalian brain and the limbic system. Particularly, there's a part of it called the amygdala. The amygdala is our alarm system. And that will just instantly go off. So if I threw that snake at Mike, he's going to instantly respond. You do not have an opportunity to think about that. It's a gut response. I don't think there's anybody who can stop that response from happening. Okay? The limbic system is also gets hijacked, or the amygdala gets hijacked. Road rage. That is when if you've ever, of course nobody here has ever done this, but if you've exploded at your kids, that's your amygdala going on. And it's going into the fight or flight. The last section, I'm going to bring the brain back over the top. That's your cortex, and it's called the primate brain. It's what we share with higher level apes, the dolphins, whales, and also elephants. That's the part of us, and some people call it executive functioning. It's right in the front here. That's a part that we can think about thinking, and that other animals don't have that except the ones that I mentioned. Right? That's making sense to people? So this is this higher level function. And if you notice how the brain is, this is all connected to each other. So when our limbic system takes over, we go into road rage, it's in a sense like we flip our lids. And we lose all rational thought. And think about how many times that happens. Being able to calm our bodies down and trying to deal with the fight or flight in that response brings the cortex back in line, and we can start rationally thinking. Those old sayings of like counting to 10 and stuff like that, they work because scientifically they really do something. Is that making sense to people? It's critical that we understand that. And teaching this to kids, that they understand. I actually have kids who will turn to me and go, yeah, Mr. Brown, I flipped my lid tonight. And my limbic system took over, and I went into the mammalian brain and did. And think about it for a second. That's a dog. You know, you think about a dog. I had my dog the other day, and she was not behaving well. She ran out of the car when we went to the park and attacked another dog. And I yelled at her. Gut response from me. My fight or flight went on, and I yelled at her because she went after this other dog, and she just cowered instantly. And that's that whole going in, because she can't think about it, going, wait a minute, he's yelling at me because I did something wrong. She's scared. So then you start thinking about our kids, and if we're in situations and they're stressed out and all, they're constantly disconnected in this area, and they're going here. And that's not a good place to be going when you're trying to learn. Okay? So that's getting into the brain. The relational piece. Thank you. Just watch me for a second, and watch my hand, and see if you notice anything in your body when I do this. I doubt you do. If you do, talk. Now, same motion. How many of you got thirsty? Do you know why? We have something in our brains called mirror neurons. They found them out accidentally. They were studying some monkeys, and they were doing all this stuff with these monkeys with functional MRIs and all that. And one of the researchers grabbed, I think I've heard both, either an ice cream cone or a snack, and grabbed it. And instantly the monkey's brain, as if it was eating, it fired off. So we have these mirror neurons in us. It's also why we have empathy. When we really feel something with somebody else, that's when our mirror neurons are firing all the time. So when you get into this whole thing about the mind, it's this relationship with our bodies and with each other. We are not really that separate. And that sounds really cosmic-y and kumbaya and stuff, but we know it. We know it all the time. And you look at research about teaching and stuff like that, it's not about the best curriculum or whatever, it's who that teacher is. And as a therapist, I encourage, one of the best things I ever heard from John Kabat-Zinn, you want to give the greatest gift in the world to your kids, have your act together. Really know who you are and really understand what sets you off and stuff like that, because that's the greatest gift, to have no crap for yourself. He's a pretty blunt guy. Is this making sense to people? I'm covering this really quickly, so just bear with me. And if you do have questions, feel free. 10 minutes. So let me get into the teen brain. I'll go through this, I'm sorry, 10 minutes, but we'll see how we do. Some myths about the teenage brain. Raging hormones. That's not going to say that they're not there. I have 3 nieces. They're all adolescents, and I have my sister-in-law. There are certain times I don't go to the house. It's not to say that hormones don't make an impact on guys, too. My son's smell, I have 2 adolescent boys. It's there. Mostly what's going on is going on in our brains. And what's happening in the brain during the teenage years is this thing called pruning. One of the things they found, best thing if your kids are interested in music, around 13 is the best time to start teaching, because that's when the pruning process begins. And pruning is we have these neurons, and the saying is neurons that fire together wire together, right? And when they're at that age, they have an excess of neurons. And so they're starting to prune out, and the basic thing is if you don't use it, you'll lose it. And so there's certain areas, like that's why, with languages and stuff like that, we'll lose it because you're not using it. And the brain starts to prune itself. But these neurons that fire together, it's that practicing that keeps happening. Just a time for immaturity, and teens need to grow up. I sound really crazy, and I've been around teens for a while. I think it's one of the most exciting times. They think incredibly creatively. And I think it's an amazing time for them. And it's not just about immaturity. And if you think 200 or 300 years ago, at their ages, 15, 16, they were parents. We've extended. Anybody know how long adolescence is now? 12 to 24. 12 to 24. Around 24, the brain, it's not that it's done. It's like it's all there. The brain's up. I tell the kids about this stuff, and they turn to me and they say, oh, so Mr. Brown, I can tell my parents I'm not responsible because my frontal lobe is not. No, you just need to take more time. And I'll explain that in a second. You need to take more time to make your decisions than your parents. That's all. Growing up during adolescence, it doesn't mean about getting away from the parents all the time. It's about changing your relationship. And what I think, and I wish that we could spend more time on this, it's about getting other adults. I think it's great to get coaches and other teachers, because that's the time that they do it. From an evolutionary point of view, and they found this out in animals, we have adolescence and that desire to get away is because it stopped crossbreeding and inbreeding. Because adolescents' job was to get away from the tribe and start their own tribes. And so that's deeply ingrained in us, so that we all have gone through it. We need to get away from our parents. We don't like it. I have 2 adolescent boys. I hate it. But it's part of us from an evolutionary point. Dan is great with this is Dan Siegel's work from a book called Brainstorm. It's on the sheet that when you came in. He loves using all these acronyms. So he gets into what's the essence of adolescence. The emotional spark. We all know adolescents, their amygdala is really, really active. And that's because they're learning to do this executive functioning and learning to bring this back online, but they're very emotional, and that's great. It's part of that growing and trying to remove from the parents. Social engagement, we know it's really, really important. The friends are the most important thing in the world. And again, going from an evolutionary point, the theory and what they're looking at is it's that whole adapt or die. Well, they help societies adapt by creating their own social groups with themselves and moving on, and all that creativity that happens there. Novelty, teens just love different, unique things. One of the other worlds I'm in my workaholic world, is I do a thing called adventure-based counseling. I train outward bound instructors, I do ropes courses and all that. I got into it because I know that that is what kids really need. They need safe risk-taking and finding ways to do it because it's in them to take risks. And about the creative explorations, I love listening to kids come up with ideas, and they come up with amazing ones. And when they're in that environment, that's a yes environment, I've been blown away. I run a leadership program that is almost completely run by the kids, and they have made it evolve over the years to this amazing program, all on them. The teen's brain, dopamine. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter, and if you walk out of here, just remember, dopamine is about rewards. Whenever we feel good, that's dopamine spiking. When the adolescent years come up, that's when dopamine starts to spike even more. That's why they do things that just feel good. That runs into lots of problems. Increased impulsiveness. You know, teens are really impulsive. Going back to the brain, well, if this is all happening, that's where dopamine's hitting them, they don't get that functioning back on. They can't get to the executive function. Just a quick piece on this, around the idea of addiction. Again, this is coming from Dan Siegel's work. With dopamine and drug use, that's what's being rewarded and increased. So when they start looking at it, particularly why teenagers have a higher susceptibility to addiction, it's because that's where the spike is happening. It's totally science, no morals or anything. But one of the things, there's a recent article I shared with parents at Bernardsville. It's called The Myths of Teaching Teenagers How to Drink Responsibly. You are just rewarding them to pick up this habit, going into neurons that fire together, wire together, and the studies have shown, this just recently came out, the studies have shown, if you teach your kids how to drink responsibly in teenage years, and you do that quite a bit, that's what they learn to do. And they found the kids who drink in high school responsibly, per se, they drink a lot more in college. And that study just came out. I'm sorry I don't know where that came out of. And if you want, I'll send it to Lisa. But it's really interesting. From a scientific point of view, it's because it's rewarding the dopamine constantly. Hyperrationality. Give you a quick example of this. This is what happens with teenagers.
Sorry.
Yeah.
The no drinking during the teenage years?
That's going to be your decisions and how you do it, but I just want you to really just be aware about it. And I can't say like absolutes, and I think every family has to do their own, but you need to realize that I deal with this with parents at Burnsville all the time about the idea, well, if I teach them responsibility to drink, then they're not going to do it in college. The studies show just the opposite, that they'll drink more in college. So, and I'll send that to Lisa, that if people are interested in that research. Hyperrationality, I'll just give you an example about this that was in one of Dan's books. It was a patient of his, a teenage girl who decides, she's at private school, she decides that she's going to throw a party at the dean's house of the private school and bring alcohol to it and get the dean's daughter to drink with her. And obviously she gets caught. She gets expelled from school. What hyperrationality gets into is she weighed out that feel-good sense. It feels better to get my peers' appreciation. I'm going to have a great story to tell in the future, all that. She knew she would get in trouble. Our kids know they'll get in trouble, but they hyper-rationalize when they make all these arguments about the pro side, and they have a hard time seeing the negative side. To put it in a really blunt way, and this comes from Dan, it's Russian roulette. Statistically, if you play Russian roulette, one bullet in that gun, or whatever money you're going to get if you play it, statistically, you most likely will win the money. It's a really stupid thing to do. But they think very concrete about that, and that's one of the things that we need to be aware of in the teen brain. So here's the answers to everything to help you with this. In the next 3 minutes. One of the things that happens is when all of this is connected, it's called integration. And what integration is, here's a formal definition from Dan Siegel. It's when all of this is linked, all of it's working together, our brains become integrated, they become highly effective, and we become really healthy. The other thing that starts happening as teenagers get older, to combat the hyper-rationality, they develop a thing that we have, hopefully, called just thinking. Just thinking is that gut feeling that this isn't right, or this isn't right to do. And when they're teens, it is that rationality that they get into, and there's a lot of emotion, but they don't get that gut feeling. They don't get that hyper, or what they call just thinking, and that develops in the later years. Meditation will help that happen a little bit quicker. So Dan gets into this thing called phases. I'm just going to go through these quickly because of time. That when we have an integrated brain, these are the things that are most happening with us. We become very stable, and adaptive, and flexible. Everybody know what the DSM-5 is? What us therapists use to give you diagnoses and all that stuff. Dan has a wonderful thing. We can look at everything that we deal with in life as this. It's this constant battle between chaos and rigidity. And think of ourselves, and you're trying, that's what integration is. When you get that balance between that, that's when we become really healthy. And he has a wonderful thing. I have his site and everything on there. This is the ways that we can start developing a healthy mind and working it. It's pretty common sense, but we don't spend the time doing it. Very interesting thing about sleep. Google does all these studies about sleep because it's really important to look at that. I forget the gentleman's name right now, but one of the recent studies that they found out, between the 7th and 8th hour of sleep is when long-term memory sets in. So think about your kids studying all night. If they don't get between that 7th and 8th hour, they're having a real struggle to remember that good stuff that they're studying. So okay, we got a couple seconds here. If I can just show this one last video to show you a little bit about where meditation...
For thousands of years, people have practiced meditation for spiritual, emotional, and physical well-being. But from a scientific perspective, how exactly does meditating affect your body? Does it really do anything? It all starts in the brain. During meditation, brain scans see increased activity in regions directly correlated with decreased anxiety and depression, along with increased pain tolerance. The default mode network in particular is activated when one's mind is at rest and not focusing on the outside world, and has been found to improve memory, self-awareness, and goal setting. Want to be more caring to your friends and family? When scientists compared the brains of Buddhist monks to new meditators, they found the region of the brain associated with empathy to be much more pronounced in the monks. It also literally changes your brain waves, and we can measure these frequencies. Meditators have higher levels of alpha waves, which have been shown to reduce feelings of negative mood, tension, sadness, and anger. And if that wasn't enough, it also physically changes our brain shape and size. Studies found that after 8 weeks of a meditation program, gray matter was more dense in areas associated with learning, memory processing, and emotion regulation. And yet the amygdala, which deals with stress, blood pressure, and fear, had decreased gray matter. When we look at the entire body, not only do we see decreased blood pressure, but it can also increase the variability of your heart rate. And while this may sound harmful, it actually plays a critical role in properly transporting oxygen and carbon dioxide throughout your body. Think you're getting sick? In a study where both meditators and non-meditators were given the flu virus, meditators were able to produce a greater number of antibodies and had increased immune function. If we go a little deeper, we can even see changes on a cellular level. Your chromosomes have protective protein complexes called telomeres, which help reduce damage to your DNA and lower cell death. And a shortened telomere length has been linked to several diseases such as cardiovascular disease, diabetes, Alzheimer's, and cancer. Amazingly, when cancer survivors completed a meditation program, their bodies showed significant increases in telomere length. It's believed that psychological intervention, particularly decreasing stress, has a direct effect on the enzyme telomerase, which has been shown to counteract shortening by adding DNA to the shrinking telomeres. Of course, meditation is not a substitute for other medical advice or a healthy lifestyle. We don't want you leaving this video thinking it will cure cancer. But much like hitting the gym can grow your muscles and increase your overall health, it seems that meditation may be a way of working out your brain with extra health benefits. And since your brain controls, well, all of you, why not relax and say, every once in a while. And if you like working out your brain,
this is a huge list. If you Google mindfulness right now, you'll get 25,000 hits on it. The research is absolutely amazing. And if you start looking at all the areas that it addresses, it is not the cure-all. I'm going to tell you that right now because it takes a lot of work. It's really hard. Let's spend a second or two talking about what it takes to do it. if you have an interest, I gave you a sheet when you came in. There's tons of books on there, John Zen books. There's apps. Kids love it. There's 2 apps. One is called Headspace.com. And it's on your sheet, so you don't have to write it. Headspace starts out free. The first 10 days is a 10-day challenge. Kind of the stuff I did in the beginning with you. It does those exercises, walks you through it, and after the 10 days, they want you to buy it. I think you learn enough from just doing that you can start your own type of practice with it. There's another one. My son just turned me on to this, and my sons hate all this stuff. And it's funny to see, like, they'll use it for sports. And they'll get into it. My son uses it before he plays basketball. Another one called Smiling Mind. And that's got a whole bunch of different things for different age levels. I just put this in about where this is. People question this and they have all these questions about, well, this is Buddhist stuff, this is whatever. Like I said, most of my training, almost all of my training has been medical. I've been through the Google training, Search Inside Yourself, which is a great book. Very easy read, but they are doing amazing work at Google. Higher education, every training I've been in is really interesting. When I went to the Google training, I was the only therapist there. Everybody else was corporate people and had a lot of higher education people. Columbia University was there. I'm in a class right now through Stanford University about cultivating compassion, and it's taught by a neuroscientist. And at first you think, oh, well, that's kind of like a flaky kumbaya class. It's amazing that the kinder we get, the nicer we get to each other, our health gets better. Really amazing. Mind Life Institute is an organization that got created. There's this guy named Matthew Ricard. Matthew was a microbiologist at the Pasteur Clinic. For whatever reasons, he became a Buddhist monk. And he is now combining scientists with people who are doing contemplative practices, not just Buddhists, rabbis, priests, and all. And the Mind Life Institute has exploded with their research. Their research in this place. And the last thing about mindful schools, I'm really encouraged that you would even present this here. There are tons. It's interesting how the country is. Out west, when I go to trainings and stuff like that, I can't tell you how many schools have it. Out here, people are like mindfulness, and now that they did the thing on 60 Minutes, a little bit more of an interest. But there are amazing curriculum. One in particular, which is going to sound funny, Goldie Hawn has created a thing called Mind Up. She worked with Dan Siegel. Goldie Hawn, if you ever get a chance to see her, she is not the ditzy blonde. She is brilliant. And she's put a lot of her own money and stuff. So there's lots of information. There's conferences around there. And I guess the big wish is this last quote. Campo Sui is master of self. I don't know why he kept the Latin in there. We do now have the instructions of how to teach this, and it's very effective. If you have questions now, that's great. If you think of something later, email me. Just let me know where you're coming from. I do a lot of presentations, and just, if I can respond back to you. The books are a good way to start. If you know what TED Talks are, and if you just go to TED Talks, Matthew Ricard is on there. This is a great thing about Matthew, because they did a thing on him on Time Magazine. He's considered the happiest man alive. One of the things, just last piece of information about your brain, right frontal lobe here is where depression sits, avoidance, and pessimism. Left frontal lobe is where optimism sits, where this idea that we can approach problems, and there's a question if happiness sits there or not. Question's wrong. 8-week programs, we were talking about the 8-week meditation programs, the mindfulness-based stress reduction. Functional MRIs have shown that the brain shifts over to the left side, and that's been duplicated in numerous studies. When I run long-term programs with people, and after they come out, they'll start talking about, I want to approach things more, I feel more optimistic, I feel like I can do more. And that has been shown scientifically. It's a thing where your brain actually starts to thicken, and that happens there. Matthew Ricard, they put him on a functional MRI. They say the left side of his brain is off the charts. And it's so off the charts that this idea of mindfulness is just being open to whatever's happening. They say they can fire a gun near him. We would all have this thing called a startle response and all that. They say that he barely moves. They can show it in videos. And the other piece that they found with his brain, which is really interesting, they said, well, the average person can pay attention for about 2 or 3 minutes. He goes, no, that's not true. We can go much further. And that's where the Mind Life Institute got started, because they start studying where our attention can stay. They put him in a functional MRI. 4 hours, his brain didn't shift. And here's a man, and if you read up about him, he's just not this Buddhist monk. He comes from a very prestigious line of science. So it's wonderful to see how they're combined. Questions? Yes.
I've read a good amount about mindfulness myself, and I also have a 13-year-old boy who's pretty well typed. If I talk to him about this stuff, he's like, "Mom, you're getting weird on me." so coming from me, I feel like it's harder for a parent.
Yeah.
Do you have suggestions? I mean, the apps you mentioned,
The apps work
for helping your child learn about this, but not from a parent necessarily.
Two quick things, and if you're really very interested in stuff, develop the practice in yourself before you even begin to approach your kids, because it doesn't make sense to have your kid do it. And then my kids, I am under a microscope. If I freak out on my kids because of garbage, Dad, you need to go meditate. It's horrible. The other piece to it that to look into, there's an organization, and I haven't been that involved with them, I'm just in conversations with them. It's called IB-Me. It's Inward Bound Mindfulness Education. They run weekend retreats for adolescents to learn this so they're not weird. Dan Siegel's behind it, so there are some good scientists who are behind it and back them. So that's another piece of it. I don't know anybody right now who's running an adolescent group, but that might be something that, if I find out stuff, I'll pass it on to Lisa. It is better to come from somebody else, I'm a huge yoga fan. My kid do yoga all the time. My kid won't go near it. But one of my friends who does it is a yoga teacher, and also my boys are doing it. That's a relationship thing too, where I really think we need to create mentors that kids learn, because they do need to separate from us. And we need to let go. It's really hard. Any other questions? Yeah?
You mentioned yoga. I've taken yoga sporadically, but is it really if you do a mindfulness class, is yoga, like you get mindfulness? I don't think you do. I think you sort of need a mindfulness class to recognize what yoga is doing to be the mindful part. You know what I'm saying? It's like
Yes.
you do it too much on automatic when you're in yoga, and you don't know how to use it later, maybe?
Yeah.
In a stressful situation?
Yoga was originally created to tire the body out so your mind would slow down. Shavasana, the corpse pose at the end, when you get into that, it's tiring your body out. So in yoga, that went crazy, it's called the asanas. The asanas are the moves. That's barely a part of yoga. It's such a small piece, as an American, to get into the exercise piece of it. Moving meditations, there's walking meditation. Yoga can become very meditative. If you do a Tai Chi, if you've ever seen the martial art of Tai Chi, that is a moving meditation. So movement can happen. And that's what I do with kids a lot. It's hard for people to sit still. But the eventual goal is to get to sit still. The brain research has shown the moving meditation is great, but you're still paying attention to movement and stuff. And it is getting us to pay attention, but that seated work is the hardest. So yoga can be, if you do it, anything can be mindful. There's another woman named Ellen Langer. I don't think I put this in the book. She doesn't meditate. She doesn't talk about meditation. She's up at Harvard. She talks about mindfulness and how you can develop mindfulness in your life just by becoming aware. When you do the dishes, one of the sayings is when you do the dishes, do the dishes. Don't go think about it when you're in the shower. Be there by yourself. And that builds up those neural circuits and neurons. So, anything else? Yeah.
This might actually be more for Dr. Masusa. I was at an earlier session in the year with anxiety, and I almost asked this then, and I'm definitely going to ask it now, because I've been doing yoga a long time, and in my house I've said a million times I wish that the schools were forcing you guys, because they won't do it, because I do, to learn yoga and meditation. Is there ever any discussion of adding that to maybe the PE curriculum or somewhere to help them reduce the stress that the school naturally and the society places on them here?
Were you a mind reader too during that
Oh.
presentation? Yes, we talk about all kinds of different ways to approach health and PE, and that's been something I've been thinking about as I sit here. And even just before, I happen to be a runner. We were talking about Chi running. That was his way to hook me into mindfulness. But we've experimented with yoga and meditation sessions during final exams and even midterms when we used to have them. And I think this is something worth exploring. My first question for John is going to be, when can you come back? My curiosity is beyond peak, both as a parent and a practitioner. So, to be continued.
Okay.
Yes.
I read somewhere, maybe you told it, an article, it was in the Times, about a good way to start is just to start with mindful eating.
Yep.
Especially with teenagers, it's just a good way to tell them to put the fork down and
You all were
stop.
late. We were going to do a mindful eating.
Okay. So just to get them into the concept of something that they can all relate to, instead of this far out yoga thing, which they think is crazy, and just that mindful, think about what's on your fork, stop and eat, put it down, and just think about the food, how it tastes, what it feels like in your mouth. That whole concept of coming in touch with who you are and what your body does.
Yep.
It works out pretty well.
James Joyce wrote the book Dubliners. It's a great line. And Mr. Duffy lived a short distance away from his body. I've been in education for a really long time, and I love education, but we teach from here up. We don't do the whole embodied thing. That's something that we need to learn more about. Other questions? Yes?
Is that the same thing as being present in the moment?
Being present in the moment. Good luck. Good luck. It's hard. Yes.
So for an adult who's being introduced to this formally for the first time, you have the 15 books on here. Do you have a few that you can say start here?
I would say the best one to start, the book by John Kabat-Zinn, Wherever You Go, There You Are. And it's very quick, easy lessons every day. Try this. It's like the mindful eating. Try this. It's just the awareness piece. Any of his books, honestly, CDs are another great way to start. I put on there mindful.org. It's a magazine. Go on there. There's tons of free stuff, tons of sections on research. It's really quite. I was a huge skeptic. I learned about this stuff 20 some odd years ago, and I was just like, I'm not doing this stuff. I'm not doing Kumbaya. And then I started seeing massive differences. I started out actually with Tai Chi, and it was a real challenge for me to do this martial art. I just thought like you're going really slow, and at the time I was a big time runner, and I was really tight. You're going crazy about me, so I started with that. So I gave you lots of lists there just to kind of pique your interest, and I think you have to find out what works for you. There's a very famous Buddhist monk named Thich Nhat Hanh. You know him. He's very famous for walking meditation. He walks with people. In walking meditation, you pay attention to where your foot hits the ground, and then you feel it connects. And it's doing the same thing. It's training. It's weightlifting. Just think of it as you're training yourself to pay attention. And we don't do that. We're never taught that. Yeah.
Just one more thing. It's like my kids are like going to college, and like I have only actually one right now. I feel so much more mindful just because I have only one child in the house. It's like I kind of feel like I used to feel before I was married. You know what I mean? It's just like you get your mindfulness just comes back when you're alone more. So I mean, it's really the challenge is when people are on you, irrational. What do you call it? The dog brain or whatever. You know what I mean? It's almost impossible when you have kids.
It's not. It's not. We don't have time. I go into lots of stories about how it's not. And like I said, I've worked with some really severe people. Part of my background, is dealing with people in trauma and dealing with people who have massive panic attacks. And I'm hopefully going to be doing some this eventual work. I'm going to be working with the wounded warriors. This is being used a lot in the military right now. A real lot. Because they're finding out works really well with post-traumatic stress. So it's doable. One of the things I'm going to leave you a quick little saying, connect before you correct. And if you really think about it, we're in the middle of a fight with somebody, we never say anything worthwhile. But we've got to get that connection. And that connection is that huge piece. And that's mindfulness. Can I connect? And I can give you tons of stories. I have 2 kids. I could talk about this all the time. One of my favorite quotes is, we teach best what we need to learn most. Our kids push our buttons. And they do it in great ways, but when we can get those connections, it's amazing what happens. Anything else? So here's your challenge when you leave, just to see how mindless we are and how much we've practiced it. When you leave here, every time you come to a stop sign, actually stop. No, it gets better. It gets better. When you stop as an acronym, this is going to show you how mindless we are and how much work we need on this. The S stands for stop. Actually stop. Don't roll, stop. You'll be worried somebody's going to beep at you. We'll see. T, take a breath. Just take one slow, deep breath. O, observe one sense. A sound, a sight, feeling of the wheel, music, whatever it is. Just observe one thing. P, proceed. Good luck. Thank you very much. Thank you.